Good day. My group members and I did a research on the association between dark triad and the perception of help among adults. Right now, myself, Shanara Lakshmi, Fatma Fanda, and Ahmed Razak are going to present it here. And I'll be giving you an introduction on this topic. When each individual perceives a situation in a particular way due to their personality trait, this is called trait theory. That is, characteristics are viewed as distal upstream predictors of downstream outcomes. Individuals who are psychopathic lack empathy and engage frequently in thrill-seeking and impulsive behavior. And Machiavellian people tend to have a manipulative and exploiting nature, whereas individuals with high narcissistic trait tend to consider themselves entitled and superior to their peers and are self-absorbed. Although studies on dark triad is still at its prime, several researchers have demonstrated correlation between dark triad and the relationships, corporate performances, and social misconducts. Studies that have been done recently has focused on how a specific trait responds to empathy and gratitude. Individuals with high scores in dark triad, especially Machiavellianism and psychopathy, are considered darker than narcissism, since they tend to perceive less grateful emotions. This evident relation between dark triad and antisocial behavior and unempathetic behavior is consistent throughout several works of many researchers. It has been found that people who engage in antisocial behavior identify others' motives as less genuine and more selfish, since they don't understand pro-social indications. Therefore, people with high dark personalities tend to perceive others negatively. People with high psychopathy perceives helpful people as less helpful, whereas individuals with narcissistic and Machiavellian traits regard them neither more nor less helpful. Although in a high helpful situation, individuals with dark traits inaccurately assesses them as more helpful. The previous studies often emphasizes each trait independently and do not integrate the dark traits. The aim of the study is to investigate and assess the relationship between dark triad and the perception of help among young adults. The hypothesis of this high levels of dark triad would predict lower levels of perception of help. Now I will hand it over to Fatima.
The research design was non-experimental, and we used linear regression to analyze the data. The independent variable was the dark triad, which consists of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism scores, while the dependent variable was the perception of help, which includes the participants' perception of how valuable the help was to them, the benefactor's genuine helpfulness, and how much it cost them to help. We sampled participants living in Asia and Europe through convenience sampling, with the majority from Asia. The participants were initially 520, however, those with anomalous or incomplete data were excluded, which resulted in 145 participants from the age of 18 to 60. We measured the dark triad using the short dark triad questionnaire, and participants were presented with a vignette including 2 ultimatum game scenarios. In these scenarios, the participants bought a lottery ticket because of his or her financial need. However, due to an error, both he or she and person X, whom the participants knows is independently wealthy, 100,000 rupees, so they agreed to share it. In the first scenario, which is low help, person X decides to give the participant 20,000 rupees and keep 80,000 to themselves. However, in the second scenario, person X gives 80,000 to the participants and keeps 20,000, which is the high help condition. The participants can choose to accept or decline, but in this case, both parties lose the prize money. Subsequently, 3 questions assessing the perception of the benefactor's genuineness, cost, and value of the help received was presented to the participant. A questionnaire and vignette were shared with the participants through an online Quadrix link posted across social media platforms. The data was collected for 20 days and screened, and anomalies were removed from the data set. For the result, we calculated a simple linear regression to predict the perception of help based on the dark triad, and the model was not significant. Only 2% of perception of help was explained by the dark triad. This suggests some negative relationship between the variables. However, the magnitude of this relationship is very weak and non-significant. Therefore, a higher dark triad does not predict a lower perception of help, and a hypothesis was not supported. 2 researchers reported that in low helpful situations, those with high levels of dark triad misperceive others as more helpful. The findings contradict our result. However, while we integrated the low and high help conditions, they studied them separately, which resulted in different conclusions from both conditions. This is because, unlike the low help, they found that in highly helpful situations, higher psychopathy contributed to lower perceived help, while people with higher Machiavellianism and narcissism perceived helpful people as neither more nor less helpful. Furthermore, similar to our findings, more researchers found that the dark triad, which is an integration of the dark traits and these traits independently, do not predict gratitude towards received help in low helpful situations. Similarly, in highly helpful situations, gratitude is not influenced by the dark triad. However, it is negatively predicted by psychopathy and narcissism independently. Their findings suggest that the dark traits only predict the perception of help when the situation is highly beneficial. The results of these studies imply that the influence of the dark triad on the perception of help could differ depending on the type of help received, which is low help or high help. This implication is also in line with our unexpected findings, which was that in high help conditions, higher dark triad predicts low perception of help. However, in low helpful situations, that is not the case.
One main strength of the study was that the sample ratio of the sample's gender ratio was relatively balanced and the representation of females and males were equal. However, the study had its own limitations. The sample size was too small, which could affect the reliability and generalizability of the findings. Uh, and due to the nature of a study being non experimental, most of these designs are retrospective and the independent variable cannot be manipulated, making it difficult to control extraneous variables. This makes the design more vulnerable to bias. The low adjusted R square suggests that more variables could impact the perception of health. Therefore, future research could study this relationship with other potentially contributing variables to improve the model's explanatory power. Such variables could include the type of culture, for example, individualistic or collectivistic cultures. This would provide further insight into the subject of the dark traits and how they influence people's perception and actions towards gratitude. Using a larger sample would also strengthen the results' reliability and validity. In conclusion, in a setting where people receive high help while others receive low help, the dark traits do not play a significant role in how people perceive help. That is, those with higher levels of dark triad would not have a significantly lower perception of help compared to those with a lower dark triad. Thank you, and here are the references.